Welcome in, everyone. Iran's missile strikes on Israel. That's got everyone talking, right?
Definitely a situation with global consequences.
Exactly. And there's this really interesting analysis by Decker Eveleth from just a few days ago, October 4th, breaking down the attack on Nevatim Air Base. He's all about open source intelligence, satellite images, public statements, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's incredible what you can glean from publicly available information these days.
Yeah.
Eveleth really digs deep.
Okay, so first thing that jumps out, 180 missiles. 180. That's a massive jump from what we've seen before.
Right off the bat, you got to ask, what's changed?
Yeah.
Well, one of the biggest things Eveleth points out is the tech itself.
Like, they weren't just pulling out old junk.
Not at all. We're talking about Iran's latest and greatest, the Fateh and Khyber Shaken missiles, to be precise.
Okay, hold on. Break those down for me. What's the big deal with these specific missiles?
Well, they're not your granddad's Scuds, that's for sure. These are solid-fueled, which is huge for deployment. Easier to store, easier to move, easier to launch, basically. A much more immediate threat.
Gotcha. So more mobile, more ready to go at a moment's notice.
Exactly. But it gets even more interesting because some of these missiles get this, they have maneuvering warheads.
Maneuvering warheads. Okay, now you're just messing with me, right? What does that even mean?
I know, right? It sounds like something out of a movie, but this is real deal. In the final moments of flight, those warheads can actually change direction, making them incredibly difficult, if not impossible, to shoot down.
Wow. Even with, like, the most advanced missile defense system.
Even then. Imagine trying to hit a target that's constantly moving, dodging at the last second. That's what these warheads are capable of.
That's insane. Talk about an arms race. But, okay, so they're firing these advanced missiles at Nevatim Air Base. How hard is it to actually hit something like that? I mean, it's not like blowing up a building. It's this huge spread out area.
You're right. It's a really tough target to hit effectively. Eveleth actually dives into this in his analysis, using satellite imagery to assess the damage.
What do you find? Give us the rundown.
Well, the satellite photos do show some damage, for sure. A support building took a hit, and a maintenance hangar is pretty banged up.
So they weren't shooting blanks, that's for sure.
Definitely not. But here's the thing, the really interesting part is around the F-35 shelters.
Ah, the F-35's Israel's top-of-the-line stealth fighters, right?
It's the very same.
Yeah.
And those shelters are built tough. But when you look at the satellite images,
Let me guess, some pretty close calls.
you could say that. Craters very close to the shelters. Some even look like direct hits.
So what happened? Duds. Or are those shelters just that good?
It's probably a bit of both,
Yeah.
to be honest. There's always the chance of a malfunction, but Israeli military engineering is nothing to sneeze at. They know how to build things to withstand a punch. Really highlights the back and forth between offense and defense in modern warfare.
A constant game of cat and mouse, pushing the limits of technology on both sides. But even if some of those missiles didn't completely hit their mark, Eveleth makes a point that really stuck with me.
And it's a crucial one. This close is still way too close for comfort, right? Even if those shelters held up. The fact that Iranian missiles could get that close to some of Israel's most important assets, that's got to be a wake-up call.
Like a shot across the bow saying, we're getting closer.
Exactly. And it plays into the bigger picture here, right? Even if they didn't wipe out the entire Israeli Air Force with this one attack, there's a message being sent.
So what's the message? What's Iran trying to say here beyond just, we can cause some damage?
Eveleth argues it's about deterrence. Basically, showing their capabilities, making it clear that they can and will inflict pain if they choose to.
A show of force, but on a whole other level. But how does this one attack fit into the grand scheme of things? What does it mean strategically in the long run?
It forces everyone to recalculate, doesn't it? Suddenly, the risk versus reward calculation for both sides has shifted. Iran has upped the ante, shown they're not afraid to use these capabilities.
Definitely raises the stakes for everyone involved. And there's this other aspect that Eveleth brings up, the economics of all of this, specifically the cost of missile defense. Those interceptor missiles, the ones designed to shoot down incoming threats, those aren't cheap, right?
Not even close. And that creates a real problem because ballistic missiles that Iran's firing, those are relatively cheap to produce, at least compared to interceptors.
So it's a numbers game in a way.
In a sense, yes. You can have the most advanced missile defense system in the world, but if you're facing a constant barrage, at some point, those defenses could be overwhelmed. And that's what makes it so challenging for anyone on the receiving end of these kinds of threats.
It's like a constant drain on resources, trying to stay ahead of the curve. Eveleth points out how many analysts focus on the supposed inaccuracy of some of these Iranian missiles, but he says that misses the point. Why does he say that?
Because even near misses matter. He's saying the danger isn't just about achieving perfect accuracy with every single missile. It's the demonstrated capability to inflict damage and disrupt operations that has a psychological and strategic impact all its own, even if it's not a bullseye every time.
Makes you think about what winning even means in this kind of situation. It's not as simple as it used to be. So, I gotta ask, if you were advising the Israeli government right now after this attack, what would you tell them?
That is the million-dollar question, and honestly, there are no easy answers. Military options, sure, but you've got the whole web of international relations, the potential for escalation. It's a minefield.
A delicate balancing act, to say the least, and that's what makes this whole thing so fascinating and, frankly, terrifying.
It really gets you thinking, right? How do you even begin to address something this complex? There's no magic bullet, that's for sure.
Definitely makes you realize how quickly things can escalate, and honestly, it can feel kind of overwhelming sometimes, all this talk about missiles and defense systems and geopolitical maneuvering.
I hear you. But that's why I think these deep dives are so important. The more we understand about the technology, the motivations at play, the potential consequences, the better equipped we are to make sense of it all.
It's about connecting the dots, seeing the bigger picture, not just for, like, policymakers and experts, but for everyone.
Absolutely. It's about being informed, asking tough questions, and not being afraid to challenge assumptions. That's how we push for better outcomes, right?
Couldn't agree more. We've just scratched the surface here, but even with this glimpse into Iran's missile program and the attack on Nevatim, it's clear this is just one piece of a much bigger puzzle.
A puzzle with global implications, no doubt. And it reminds us that this story is far from over. What happens next in the region, how these events shape future decisions, that's all still to be determined.
And that's what makes it all so fascinating, even if it's a little scary at the same time. So to everyone listening, thank you for joining us for this deep dive into Iran's missile capabilities and the attack on Nevatim Air Base. We hope this has given you a new perspective on this critical issue, and as always, we encourage you to keep asking questions, keep seeking information, and keep diving deep. Until next time.